Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the end of the week fun here on the Three Martini Lunch. We have all sorts of things to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the controversy into Joe Biden's use of the Autopen and what a Republican investigation could plausibly conclude and what the impact of that might be. We'll also be taking a look at Democrats on Capitol Hill actually focusing on an issue that matters. That's a new thing that they haven't done in a long time. So we'll talk about that. It deals with Chinese cyber spying and cyber terrorism. But of course, we're going to start with the news that broke pretty much after we were done recording yesterday. And I don't know if Karine Jean-Pierre is the happiest person in the world because the rest of the Democrats stopped piling on, or now she's really mad because nobody's talking about her book anymore. But either way, obviously the big story yesterday afternoon, Jim, was the online dust-up between President Trump and Elon Musk. This started earlier in the week when Musk went public with his opposition to the One Big Beautiful Bill, calling it a disgusting abomination and encouraging people to contact their congressman and their senator to vote against it. And then yesterday, Trump finally punched back a little bit at 2:37, as you report in the Jolt today on Truth Social. Trump says, Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted and that he knew for months I was going to do. And he just went crazy. The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it. A few hours later, as you report, Musk responded, in light of the president's statement about cancellation of my government contracts, SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately. He has now since backed off that in response to another tweet from someone else. Then Musk, just a few minutes later, said, quote, time to drop the really big bomb. He's in the Epstein files, meaning Trump. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Later on, he signed on to the idea of impeaching Trump and making J.D. Vance president. After that, surprisingly, Trump went a little more magnanimous, talking about the substance of the bill. Musk this morning seemed open to maybe talking with Trump. Trump does not seem open to that. So, Jim, it was a wild day on X for sure. Regardless of what you think about it, there was some classic posts yesterday. But in terms of where this leaves us with this relationship and perhaps more importantly with the big, beautiful bill, what do you think?
Greg, yesterday's knockdown, drag-out, intense fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk was such a big deal and turned everybody's attention to it so thoroughly that yesterday Aaron Rodgers signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers and no one noticed. Okay, not no one noticed, but it was much less big news than anyone would suspect. There was even some speculation that Rodgers waited for a day when everybody would be paying attention to something else. Because as we all know, Aaron Rodgers doesn't like the spotlight.
No.
Doesn't like a lot of attention around him. This is our bad. This is a bad, crazy martini, and I think probably in the long run, a bad martini for the cause of conservatism. There are a lot of things that are frustrating about this. One of them is that both of them have a valid point, or somewhere in their initial assessments that before they spiraled into accusatory diatribes. But this was long predicted. Everybody kind of knew that when you had two, whether you want to call them alpha males, two billionaires, two guys who are used to running the show, not big fans of criticism, not big fans of getting pushback, that sooner or later there'd be a disagreement between the two of them, and it would probably escalate like this, that this would suddenly turn into this Shakespearean tragedy. By the way, I'd written in the opening today's Jolt that the Hatfields and McCoys think this thing is getting a little out of hand. And someone on Twitter responded, you know, Jim, Hatfields and McCoys killed each other. To quote The Simpsons, yes, that's the joke. When I say that Kendrick Lamar and Drake offered to host peace talks, they didn't actually do that. They still hate each other, okay? When the Sunni and Shia, they did not say this is a minor scuffle, right? This is, I'm just going to say that that's, sometimes if something seems ridiculous, it's because it's meant to be. Musk is correct that the current projection is that the big, beautiful bill is going to add more than $2.4 trillion to the national debt over 10 years. Right now, according to the Doge website, they have saved $180 billion with a B, right? Big, beautiful bill is adding 2.4 with a trillion with a TR over a 10-year period. To break that down, that's $240 billion per year if it's averaging out each year. So this bill undoes all the good work of Doge so far. Now, I think Elon's got fair reason to gripe about that. He's got fair reason to say, I thought we were talking about balancing the budget. We were talking about reducing this. Now you're trying to pass this bill and it's going to add to it, and that this is, ridiculous and bad. You and I have discussed many times you have to address entitlement reform. Doge hasn't done that. This bill, you could argue it doesn't do that. It does make some small, much-needed reforms to Medicaid, and we're talking like, work requirements, verifying eligibility, really basic stuff. This is not super controversial, and it will generate some savings for Medicaid. So that's one of the good points for the bill. And I think Trump is correct that you have to extend the Trump tax cuts that expire next year. I think Trump also has a valid point that politics, as they say, is the art of the possible. Republicans have a 220 to 212 House majority. With reconciliation, you only need 50 votes. But the Senate's going to make some changes, but it's not going to look dramatically different. And I think Trump can accurately say to Elon, we can't scrap it and start over. We have to build upon what has been passed. We're going to have to have a reconciliation version. And this train is pretty darn far down this track. We can't scrap everything and start over again. And I think Elon would have a very good, reasonable point to say, hey guys, we set this goal. This bill doesn't achieve that goal, doesn't even come close to it, and we're actually making the deficit and debt worse rather than better. But he didn't just say that. He said it's a massive, outrageous, a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. Like, everything had to be turned up to 11 from the very start. And we knew Trump was going to respond some way. And it's not surprising that Trump, as he tends to do, believes that everybody else has some sinister motive for disagreeing with him. In this case, it's that Elon Musk, literally the richest man on the planet, is doing this out of greed because he wants to preserve the subsidies for electric cars and for electric vehicles. I don't think that's the case. Musk has said he's perfectly fine with getting rid of it. He just thinks that you should get rid of subsidies for all energy production, not just for the ones that are most interest to his thing. And also, Trump claimed this was about a dispute over the NASA administrator nominee. The nominee for the NASA said, look, out of the blue, I got told that I was no longer the nominee. I think I was retribution for somebody who was PO'd at Musk. God only knows what the situation is behind there. Musk makes this accusation that's fair in some ways, an unrealistic expectation in another. Trump lashes out. He also goes on about how Elon Musk had a black eye in his appearance, that he turned down makeup, and that was weird. As usual as Trump, it goes off meandering into all kinds of insinuations about Musk's character. Musk turns around and says, well, hold on, I didn't get to see the bill. Nobody got to see the bill. This came out of the blue. Not really the case, because the non-tax portions were published late April. Tax portions were published May 12th. They passed it May 22nd. Now, maybe Elon Musk was busy with Doge stuff and Tesla and SpaceX and all the other business. Maybe he didn't see that this stuff was in that bill, but it's not like this was hidden and sprung upon him in the last second. Musk also reminded Trump and his many followers on Twitter X all the different times Trump and Mike Johnson and John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, had all agreed we're going to balance the budget, we're going to eliminate the debt, we're going to all these things that really are not, all the promises that are not kept by this version of the big beautiful bill. Then Trump says we're just going to cancel Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. Musk says we're going to I'm decommissioning Dragon spacecraft, and he backs away from this. And then Musk's, as you point out, said that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. They're the real reason they haven't been public. Have a nice day, TJT. Greg, are we supposed to take from this that Musk has known that Trump was involved in Epstein Island and all that stuff this whole time, but he just didn't say anything about it because he wanted to run Doge? Is that what we're supposed to take away from all this?
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think Loretta Lynch or Merrick Garland or somebody in those Democratic administrations would have probably released that if that were true.
The one guy who we know did not kill Epstein and probably had no significant connection to him is Donald Trump. Because if he did, we would have heard about it from Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, Jack Smith, Merrick Garland. It's the one guy who's been investigated more in as many ways as possible. You can't tell me that Donald Trump was involved in something really sinister and it just hasn't been exposed by now. And the other thing which I wrote about in today's Jolt, which kind of annoys me. So you saw, Stephen Miller saying there's no new spending in this bill, or the only new spending in the bill is to defend the homeland, deport the illegals. All the other provisions are massive spending cuts. There's no pork in the bill. Well, how would you characterize quadrupling the SALT, the state and local tax deduction? Yeah, I think most of us would say, whether or not you want to characterize that as pork, that is definitely something that's in the bill to get the support of Republicans from New York, New Jersey, California, a couple other blue states that have high state and local taxes. So it's not, building a new highway interchange in somebody's district or something like that. But this is something you put in the bill to get the support of particular lawmakers. And it does, by the way, and that adds all of that, 2 point something trillion that this adds to the deficit. Almost $1 trillion, 981 billion over 10 years is what we get because of this SALT. So maybe we keep SALT the way it is, and all of a sudden we don't have quite as bad a situation with the deficit. Doesn't eliminate it, but anyway, look. Elon said, Trump is such an ingrate for considering everything Musk had done to help him win the election. I think it's a fair point. I think it's also very fair for Trump to point out that Elon, you're used to running things in your company and doing things the way you want. When you're legislating, when you're trying to pass legislation, this is a different ball of wax. Sometimes you don't always get everything you want. It would be nice if the two of them could be more mature. And I thought of, there are a lot of different comparisons. One that jumped out of my mind, Greg, was Reagan and Buckley disagreeing about the Panama Canal back in the late 70s. And they had this big special episode of Firing Line, went on for 2 hours. And you came out of that debate liking both of them. And they both liked each other. They both respected. They just disagreed very vehemently. I kind of think Buckley had the better of the two because at least for a generation, we didn't really have any issues with the Panama Canal. And Greg, listeners know how much it galls me to say Reagan could conceivably be wrong about anything. But maybe it happened. Maybe that one case. But just you look at this, and Elon Musk and Donald Trump come across as immature, emotionally incontinent, unable to control their impulses, and needing to lash out at the very first sign of disagreement. And I think it's, psychologically unhealthy, and it's just not a good form of leadership to just explode with rage the moment somebody tells you that you're wrong. And I don't buy into this idea going around on Twitter saying that's phallocentric communication or any of this other nonsense. No, I think these two guys are, used to getting their way. And the moment they encounter disagreement, they just fly off the handle, and it's very bad for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, a bunch of different thoughts here. Buckley may have been proven right for the first 20 years. I think in the last 20 years, Reagan wanting to keep control probably would have been better with the Chinese horning in down
After
there.
a generation, it looks a little different. Yes.
Yes. By the way, Reagan died 21 years ago yesterday. That's hard to believe it's been that long. But nonetheless, yes. And so the fate of the bill, we don't know. According to a lot of folks on the Hill, at least publicly, they're saying that their phones have not been ringing off the hook, even though Elon has been encouraging people to call. And I think it was Jim Jordan that I saw last night saying that, it's not like everything we want with spending cuts, but it's got school choice. It's got the tax cuts. It's got some spending revisions depending on whether you believe CBO's score or not, and obviously border security and so forth. So he thinks on the balance it's worth it. Other people obviously disagree, like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul and Ron Johnson and so forth. So we'll see what the Senate comes up with and what happens from there. Jim, I don't know about you. Yesterday was one of those days, regardless of how you feel about the issue, X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, was just a lot of fun watching people come up with their reactions to this. My two favorite, and I wish I could remember who said either of these. The first one was, if you have any bad news to get rid of today and make public, do it right now. No one will care. And the other one was, if Trump and Elon get divorced, who gets custody of Cat Turd?
Who has to get custody? Greg, I think my favorite one I saw yesterday was an AI-generated image meme of Donald Trump with his Tesla car. Apparently he said he was going to purchase one of them, and putting "I bought this before Elon went crazy" sticker on it. As the kind of what's new, the hot trend amongst all the progressives who bought Teslas, 5-10 years ago, or, now all of a sudden it's there. Or alternately, at some point, the MAGA crowd is going to start setting fire to Tesla dealerships.
Yeah,
burn the Cybertrucks,
Yeah, what do liberals do now? Some are cheering for injuries on both sides. Some are saying, maybe it's time to welcome Elon Musk back into the fold since he used to be on the left. So I doubt that's going to happen, but we'll see. We'll see what happens next. They could be buddies by next week. We have no idea. So anyway, lots to talk about in our next two martinis. But in the meantime, while we're talking about billions and trillions of dollars of spending in Washington, what's the situation with your business? Tariffs and trade policies are dynamic. Supply chains are squeezed, cash flow tighter than ever. If your business can't adapt to all this in real time, you're in a world of hurt. You need total visibility from global shipments to tariff impacts to real-time cash flow. NetSuite by Oracle is your AI-powered business management suite trusted by more than 41,000 businesses.
NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP for a variety of reasons, because it brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and human resources all into one suite. You have one source of accurate information, giving you the visibility and control that you need to make quick decisions. And with real-time forecasting, you can peer into the future with actionable intelligence. And with AI embedded throughout, you can automate a lot of those everyday tasks, letting your team stay strategic. NetSuite helps you know what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast.
Small business owners, small business experts will tell you, let AI tools, and there's none better than NetSuite by Oracle, do the work that it can do for you, frees you up to do what you do best. And right now, if your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jen, this is potentially a good martini. I think it's a good martini. It's almost a shockingly good martini. The Democrats are actually focusing on something that matters. They're not out there pounding the podium in defense of illegal immigrant gangbangers and human traffickers. They're not out there insisting that boys should be playing girls' sports. No, they're actually worried about national security, at least a handful of them in the House, which is kind of a nice change. Axios with the story, a group of Democratic lawmakers are pressing the Trump administration to clarify who is leading the government's efforts to eradicate China-backed hackers from U.S. critical infrastructure and telecom networks. Roughly 1,000 people have already left the nation's top cyber agency this year through voluntary buyouts and other workforce cuts. Those cuts could create dangerous weaknesses in the nation's cyber defenses, according to these lawmakers. This was started by Ritchie Torres of New York, who's definitely a lefty, but he's common sense on some issues. Wrote the letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard, demanding more clarity on who is leading the response against 2 major China-backed cyber attacks uncovered during the Biden administration, specifically Volt Typhoon, which attacks U.S. critical infrastructure. And some of this we've seen reports on recently about spyware embedded into critical infrastructure technology like solar panels and other things that are critical to our energy grid. And also the Salt Typhoon, which surveilled high-profile individual cell phones. The group is asking for an update on how proposed budget cuts and the recent workforce reductions will impact those investigations, specifically at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So, Jim, we don't know that the Trump administration is not focused on these things, but making sure that they are seems actually rational.
Greg, this is one of those martinis where the news is so good. You read through the article. What's the catch? This is too responsible from what we've used to come to expect from congressional Democrats. Yes. What now? They're probably the most, the closest thing you can find to genuine controversy here is that, look, the Trump administration has proposed cutting the budget for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency by $495 million. That takes it down to $2.38 billion. Generally it had been increasing pretty, year by year. Noem says she wants CISA, which is different from the CIA, to focus more on the core mission of protecting critical infrastructure and civilian federal agencies, criticizing its past efforts in election security and monitoring disinformation. Genuine, okay. But nonetheless, look, keeping an eye on Chinese hacking efforts and breaching of information, an attempt to get into the secure communications of administration officials, those are all very legitimate concerns. And this is a, very well played on the part of Ritchie Torres, who I think you actually characterize as, look, he's a House Democrat, so we're not going to agree with him a lot. But particularly by the standards of New York Democrats, and if you look at the Star Wars bar scene that is the mayoral primary down there, Ritchie Torres is probably about as good as you're going to get out of New York City Democrats. And look, these are 2 major China-backed cyber attacks uncovered during the Biden administration. We heard a lot about them when they were initially uncovered and haven't heard much since then. Now, look, I don't want to... People who listen to this podcast know, we make fun of everybody. And, we try to call them as we see them. And, there's nothing wrong with criticizing government officials, and there's nothing wrong with government officials getting into disputes, although I think I'd prefer something better than the food fight we discussed in the first martini. But the enemies out there, they hate us. They totally hate us. They hate us. They hate Republicans. They hate Democrats. They hate left, right, and center, black, white, every variety of American. They hate us and they want to harm us. You'd like to think that threat would unify us more. You'd like to think that threat would focus the minds more. And I have my doubts about this. So if this is, so good for you, Ritchie Torres, and good for you, Democrats in this committee. I hope you're right. I hope this is not just routine trying to, avoid budget cuts, but to say, hey, you've got some really important, duties for this agency and some investigations we haven't heard much about in, the last 6 months you guys have been in charge. How's it going? What's going on with that stuff? What else have you uncovered? And what other steps do we need to protect the communications of high-level government officials? And we will see what happens. But We talked a little bit in the week about the drone warfare, about what Ukraine had done to Russia this year, or just this past weekend. You figure all of America's enemies are looking at all of our cyber infrastructure and saying, anywhere there's a vulnerability, the day we decide, China decides to invade Taiwan, or Iran wants to do something, North Korea, God knows. So they will look at every one of those as an opportunity to create as much chaos over here to impede our response to whatever they're doing over there.
That's a good point. And, if these concerns about the spyware on these pieces of critical infrastructure that for some reason we're buying from China to put into place, and if they're in a position to, shut down our grid or parts of our grid, that would lead to major chaos. And so keeping the spotlight on China, whether it's making sure that these investigations go forward or just highlighting their aggressive moves in the South China Sea and just their other aggressive moves, cyber space, keep the heat on, because the more secrecy there is and the less people are paying attention about it, the Chinese are going to get away with more. So the more highlight, the better. And hopefully, again, like you said, these folks are on the up and up and not just trying to score political points. We're heading into the weekend, and it's been a long, busy week. So when you got up this morning, did you look in the mirror and go, man, it's only been a week and it looks like I've aged about 6 months here. But look, if you're a guy and it's time to try to maybe slow down that aging in your face, Caldera Lab is definitely the way to go. Caldera Lab's high-performance skincare is made just for men. It's simple, effective, and backed by science.
This is an award-winning serum with 27 botanicals and powerful antioxidants to protect your skin against daily stressors. The eye serum targets dark circles and puffiness and tired eyes with peptides and adaptogens. The base layer gives you a lightweight moisturizer with plant stem cells and snow mushroom for deep hydration and a matte finish. It's formulated for men, created by expert cosmetic chemists who specialize in men's skincare.
Skincare does not have to be complicated, but it should be good. So upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to Caldera Lab, CalDeraLab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order. All right, Jim, on to our final martini now. Still a crazy, I would say, and that is the Biden Autopen. So the more that the postmortem has come out on the final years of the Biden administration, for the most part, most of the 4 years of the Biden administration, we know how little he was actually working. There's been some reports now that Karine Jean-Pierre didn't even show up at the White House till noon because Biden wasn't really showing up until about the same time. So given the usual schedule of a press secretary, that shows a president that's not exactly burning the candle at both ends. But now the question, of course, is, and the House Republicans are starting to investigate this, what did Biden sign with the Autopen, or what was signed in his name? Was he aware of this? And is anything he signed potentially up for review as to whether it should be considered enacted? Pardons have been talked about, executive orders. Some people even saying his nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson. I don't think you're going to get away with that one, and I'm not sure how much you're going to get away with overall, because it's going to be pretty hard to prove. But apparently it has been proven that about 2/3 of the pardons and some of the things that were happening at the very end of the administration happened on the Autopen while Joe Biden was in Washington and presumably at the White House. So if that's the case, he's either exceptionally lazy or pretty much incapacitated. So, Jim, what's your take on this one?
Well, first of all, a little bit of interesting development out of the blue yesterday. I got a message from a friend of mine who, listeners may recall, a couple years ago I took a trip to Taiwan, and there was a bunch of international reporters. So the reporter from Spain reached out and said, I'm working on a story on Biden and the Autopen. Could I get a comment or two? So for all of our listeners out in Spain, look for this by Alvaro in El Español, who knows, the next couple of days or weeks. It's interesting that this is an interest overseas. I think it's going to be very hard for the U.S. Department of Justice to indict anyone for any criminal charge unless someone comes forward and either confesses to crimes or claims to be a witness to a genuine crime. Like, I saw so-and-so use the Autopen to forge the president's signature on official documents. Now, what is more likely is that Biden signed documents that were inaccurately described to him and he didn't read himself. Or the other possibility is that Biden signed documents and then forgot about them. I'm thinking in particular of House Speaker Mike Johnson's story of Biden not recognizing the pause on liquid natural gas exports to Europe. That's probably the biggest, clearest example we have of the idea that Biden was signing things and either not understanding them, having them inaccurately described to them and not reading them himself, But as I said, also the possibilities that Biden did it and just forgot what he had done, which is always all its own problems, but would not delegitimize the order that he had signed. Look, I think it's worth investigating. I think it's worth digging into. But I think it's going to require somebody who, look, maybe we'll get some stories in Karine Jean-Pierre's book, Greg. Maybe she'll say I saw Ron Klain using the Autopen all the time, or I saw Jill Biden signing, maybe we'll get somebody who will come out, some of that. My guess is probably not. My guess is that most of the time when they use the Autopen, it was, by the way, the Supreme Court has upheld everything signed by the Autopen is considered a presidential signature. You can't argue that because he didn't do it by hand, it wasn't really signed by the president. Now, again, maybe somebody gets some whistleblower. Maybe somebody cracks and breaks the code of omerta or something like that. But in all likelihood, Biden usually knew what he was talking about or what he was signing, or he didn't care about what he was signing. And it's going to be very tough to get a criminal charge out of any of this.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's kind of lazy for a president not to sign legislation or executive orders or pardons. Stuff that's consequential. I don't think it's asking too much for the president to do that. So, and I think you're probably right that nobody's going to come out and say that from the Biden administration, but there's a lot of sniping happening now, especially after KJP and from the Tapper and Thompson book. And, there's now talk about how Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, was kind of running the show. He's part of the Politburo as well. So, who knows? Somebody's been aggrieved. Somebody's been slighted in their mind. And just who knows what'll slip out here in the next few months as people try to settle scores.
If Biden wanted to get off the hook for the unpopular decisions he made, what if he came out and said, yeah, I never signed that? What, like the person who could really turn against the rest of the Politburo is Biden himself. Of course, he's not capable of pulling that off.
No, but it's
Hunter could. Hunter could say, because he's probably gonna. Well, no, he's got the lifetime pardon, right? Because it covered everything before a certain date, and he's also got the future pardon, right? So he's he could go out and murder people, right? And it would have no legal consequence. He's got a presidential pardon.
There was a day he could have done that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So. The one day he could have done that. So, yes, and if there's anybody who's got the credibility to say exactly what happened in the White House.
If Hunter Biden said it happened, surely it did.
Exactly the way it went down, yeah. So we'll find out. But, wow.
By the way, little known fact, that day that Hunter Biden was allowed to commit any crimes and have no consequences was the day of the purge. All crime is legal for 24 hours.
Quite a week and quite an end to the week. Jim, see you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend. Join us again Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.